Hey, it's time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network, with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, designated driver. Yeah, tickets and passes, please have them ready. We're poised to deliver Doctor Who conversation once again here on our big thinking, free speaking show for everyone, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to those ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. We talk about it all on this show. All views are encouraged, and there could even be a few laughs along the way too. So come and step into our TARDIS here in this anniversary year, the 60th anniversary year, here on Type 40. Yeah, back again here at Type 40 to talk all things space and time, or time and space. Whichever way around that goes, it's all fine by me. And there's no time to waste. The anniversary year is well underway. A lot to celebrate, lots to look forward to. And as always with Doctor Who, there's a lot to revisit too. I think that when it comes to these special occasions, then different episodes, different adventures, installments, whatever you call them, stand out to us for different reasons. Sometimes they could be simply the things that have kept us awake at night, or sometimes they help chart, don't they, our own lives, little monumental occasions in our own families and fandoms and everything else around it. So Doctor Who is our companion through our lives as well as vice versa. And yeah, my recycle bin is still full of cartons of Easter eggs. So it's just coming out of Easter 2023 as of time of recording, but we're going to go backwards in time this time to an Easter. It's not Christmas past. That's something else entirely. To Easter's past with one or two friends. And first of all, I'm delighted to say that waiting at the bus stop, I find somebody who's not been aboard for a little while. So I have to ask, starry-eyed girl Sarah Graham, where the bloody hell have you been? What kept you?
Hello, Dan. Hello, Spacebookers. Yeah, I've been trapped in the confession dial for 4 billion years. What can I say? But yes, I've been away, but I'm back, and yes, I'm feeling much better. Thank you. I've had lots of messages, lots of well wishes. So thank you. Yes, I'm on the mend. I'm feeling good, and I'm really excited to talk about this episode. I would say it wasn't originally a favourite, but it has grown on me over the years. So it could be an interesting discussion, I think.
When it comes to this particular era, how could I not ask you back into the console room to talk about it? Because I think this is the one that whenever we get together that we geek about the most, isn't it? The original Russell T Davies run from 2005 all the way up to 2010. It was when you discovered the show, wasn't
it? Yeah, absolutely. And just seeing that console, yeah, I just get excited. Yeah, I've got my David Tennant 10th Doctor bear behind me. And yeah, it's just happy times and places.
And I just think we need somebody extra to converse with yes, no Doctor Who story, whatever the era, gets an easy ride here on Type 40. We choose our passengers very, very carefully. And it really is, Sarah, a mega bus this time because
Mega Rider.
Are my puns getting better or getting worse?
Oh, they're definitely getting worse.
Could be. Let's gloss over it and hope that they don't notice as we welcome the mega geek, Mr. Ian David Diaz. Heaves a sigh.
Yeah.
Don't encourage me. Hello, mate. You okay?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm fine. Just ready to get stuck into this episode. Easter episode.
Enough leg room on the bus for you. Do you catch the bus very often?
Actually, all the time. Yeah. Buses are good in London, definitely. Oh, gold Easter eggs.
And did you have a nice Easter?
I did.
The point.
I did. The whole family came round. They wrecked my place and then they left. So had a good time.
Are you still finding little bits of chocolate or foil paper in the carpet, sort of embedded in it?
No, because when they leave, I just kind of clear up everything. Basically, it's like a bomb hit it, and then
the chocolate doesn't last long enough in my house for them to be any debris.
Yeah, they basically take all the chocolate. They even took mine. It was quite annoying, but there you go. And just the Aero one, the mint Aero one.
Yeah.
Like mint chocolates. Oh, it's like they left that in the fridge, and that's the only one I've got left. So I don't know whether I should chuck it or eat it, but I just don't like it.
It sounds like, Ian, it was commandeered.
Yeah.
To hide them better.
For your own good.
I've got a mini egg one hidden away that they can't find.
All right, okay.
I don't think there's been many historically in British television terms, many Easter specials. I can think of only one other than the episode of Doctor Who that we're going to be talking about on this show, and that was the one where Dawn French was the vicar of Dibley and got dressed up as the Easter Bunny. Apart from that, Sarah, I can't think of any other Easter specials in TV history ever. There must be some.
I can't think of any. It's always Christmas. It's always Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Christmas.
It is always Christmas.
Or New Year's Eve.
Or New Year, yeah.
And here in Doctor Who land, of course, we are always celebrating something. And this year, I think we've got a free pass because 60 is a big old number, and it's the 60th anniversary year of Doctor Who. An ideal time, I thought, for us to go back through. I won't quite say 60 bus stops worth, but certainly a regeneration cycle's worth of stops on the journey to take stock of all the incarnations of the Doctor and some of, if not their greatest adventures, then certainly the ones that may get us talking. And when it comes to the Doctors themselves, Sarah, and Great Britain, the home of Doctor Who, in my view, David Tennant is, I won't say a national treasure, but he must be approaching that. So David Tennant inherited the role of the Doctor in 2005, and it was seemingly overnight to a lot of us who were there watching the rebirth of either our long-standing favourite show or our new favourite show. In your case, it was all about to take flight over that spring and into summer. But the truth of the matter was that David Tennant had been sounded out about succeeding Christopher Eccleston in the role late in 2004. So it was all sort of done and dusted by the time it was back on telly during the time that he'd been working on Casanova with Russell T Davies, wasn't it? So, the 32-year-old actor, he was initially very anxious about the idea of accepting the role of his own childhood hero, but he needn't have worried, really. David Tennant proved to be the right man at the right time, and the nation took him into their hearts pretty much in an instant, didn't they, Sarah?
It was. Can you go back to 2005? It was a very random few months, because I remember obviously tuning in and following the newspapers and the magazines that were coming out, because I'd start reading it. And the headline would be, Doctor Who's back. And it's a success. And then I think it was literally the next day, it was Christopher Eccleston is leaving. Shock, exit. And we already knew that his replacement was going to be David Tennant. And it was really weird to get my head around. Like, we've only just known this person playing the Doctor. And I'd seen David Tennant in a couple of other things. I had seen him in Casanova. I can't remember. Did Casanova come out before Doctor Who? Around
It was around the same time. I think there was a week either side of the broadcast, something like that.
But yeah, I remember that article, and I was like, oh no.
What a horrible picture of David Tennant there. That picture there, the black and white one's awful, isn't it?
It is. Oh, look, it looks like Joffrey.
Yeah.
It looks really smarmy.
Well, I've always thought, and I know that David Tennant is a very good-looking man. He's got a legion of admirers out there, of men and women, both fancy the pants off this guy. To me, I always thought he looked a little bit like a weasel, and and I loved him in Casanova. I sincerely, in fact, everything I'd seen him in numerous things.
I loved him in Casanova, but I couldn't marry that, him as Casanova with what I was watching on screen with Chris Eccleston. And I'd already got that fierce attachment to Chris and to Billy. Sorry, Ian, go on.
No, I just said, I think throughout the years, I began to appreciate Chris Eccleston. When he first was introduced as the Doctor, I thought it was a complete miscast when I first saw it. Originally, when I saw the first episode, as you guys know, because we did a review on it and stuff like that, I thought it was a complete miscast. I thought his humor was completely wrong. The way he played the Doctor was wrong. It's only when we got to Dalek I begin to appreciate him as a dramatic actor, because he brought a lot of gravitas to that episode, and I think, okay, maybe he can work. And then when we got to the end with the Daleks and with Rose kissing him and all that stuff, and he changes, I thought to myself, he wasn't that bad. In other words, what I'm saying is that it didn't affect me as much as
it won you over.
When he changed from him to David Tennant, I just said what the Brigadier said. Here we go again. Do you know what I mean? So it didn't really affect me that much, But
it was an intense time, wasn't it, Ian?
Yeah.
To watch that show screen, to see it come back to life, people latch onto it, and then for the lead actor to change and to bring in somebody who was still large. Okay, he was been in this big drama, but was still largely unknown. I mean, I went straight onto Gallifrey Base. I think it was still Outpost Gallifrey then.
Yeah.
And I posted, because I didn't know who read these things, so I posted, I can't believe they've gone with this guy. He looks like a weasel. I did. And then a few years later, I read a story where David Tennant had said, when I was cast as the Doctor, I went onto Gallifrey Base, and I saw there was numerous people saying, "Oh, he's one of my very favourite actors. I can't believe he's going to be the Doctor." And he was really, he was really pleased, felt really sort of bolstered by that. And he said in this interview, and then I came across a comment from somebody who said, "Why have they gone with him? He looks like a weasel." And then he just wanted to curl up. And I thought, oh my God, that was me.
Infamy.
I don't know. I think Chris Eccleston's version of the Doctor kind of worked towards the ending, but I don't know. I don't think the dynamic between Rose and him worked for me anyway. I thought the dynamic between Rose and David Tennant's Doctor worked so much better than with Chris Eccleston, and especially, and I know a lot of people don't like this. I really like the romance between Rose and.
It's not for everybody, is it?
I know it's not for everybody, but
I didn't mind it, but I obviously come into it as a newbie.
Yeah,
it wasn't a big deal to me.
Yeah.
But it felt earned because we'd seen them grow and.
And also, the Doctor's allowed to just like human beings, the Doctor should be allowed to have that one person in his life that was the one that shook, shook his heart and he was connected to, and it was Rose. I mean, every other companion that he's been with, that they've never affected him like Rose has. Do you know what I mean? And also, remember, the Doctor is a Time Lord, so when he reaches 100 in Earth years, he's probably only 15. Do you know what I mean? So he's kind of growing. Do you know what I mean? So he's like, what is it, 200 years old here or 400 years old here? So maybe he's just reaching teen. Do you know what I mean? So we have to look at it that way, that he's an alien, and the way he sees life is completely different to the way we see life. Do you
the
know what I mean?
cycles
So,
of his life move differently.
Yeah.
So like wheels within wheels.
Yeah. That's what I
lives
think.
within lives. And his idea of personal growth would not necessarily be as linear.
Yes.
As a human being's life. I mean, in all seriousness, I did say that, and if that was my comment that David read, I was ever so sorry, David, because when I saw this initial publicity picture of David Tennant with Billy Piper there as Rose Tyler and in his suit, I got chills. When I remember seeing Chris Eccleston for the first. I remember seeing Chris Eccleston in his costume for the first time and thinking, "Oh, okay, that's what they're going with. Oh, all right." And it grew on me. But with this, I thought, "Oh my God, the Doctor's back." That
I'm
is
saying,
absolutely the Doctor stood there with his plucky companion.
He does. I mean, and when I first saw,
I was instantly back on board here.
Yeah, his coat when he was wearing that picture of him and Billy when he was wearing the coat, I was like, that's definitely a Doctor, right? I had a problem with Chris Eccleston. He looked like I don't know. He was okay. I accepted his costume, whatever. But I don't care what anyone says. The Doctor has to have a freaking costume. I don't care what anyone says, because that is what we grew up with. The frilly shirt, the scarf. The multicolored, whatever. Do you know what I mean? He has to have a look, and I think David Tennant is among one of the best. Before David Tennant, I thought Davison's costume was brilliant. The cricket costume, I thought that was brilliant, and then David Tennant came along and blew that out of the water. Do you know what I mean?
It's a similar silhouette. Obviously, the coat is longer. That was a stipulation, wasn't it, Sarah? He said to Russell when he accepted the job, "Look, if I'm taking this job, I want a big, long coat down to there."
I remember that interview.
and obviously because David Tennant is not as tall as Russell T Davies, but he's not far off. He's very tall, a very, very lean, a very athletic man. And so even without this long coat and casting a sort of more foreboding shadow, he is a lot more the traditional heroic figure. Not just than his predecessor, but also than the guy who would come after him too. But I believe that David Tennant, what he brought to his characterization as the Doctor was as well as that heroism that he was able to tap into, and the physicality of being a man in the prime of his life who was physically very, very capable. So he'd got that, but he'd got this natural quirkiness, a geekiness, for want of a better word, that he'd sort of, I suppose, the person that he'd grown up being, really. He was able to tap into his inner child and let that all off the leash. So you'd got a much more sort of comic book hero incarnation of the Doctor, maybe.
He didn't try to copy the others.
No, not at all. He was full of charisma. And yes, he wasn't using his own native accent, obviously, because David Tennant is a Scot.
That's a good idea.
But I agree with you. Ian. I think his choice in that, I think it was a very wise choice.
Yes, it was.
And I accept that I think we have to acknowledge that it probably wasn't the easy choice, but it was definitely the right one.
But do you see the difference between Chris and him? Chris was trying to be something that he wasn't. So when you see the first episode, I know it wasn't shot in chronicle. How do you pronounce that word? Anyway, I know it wasn't shot in order, but when you see Chris the first time you see him, he was trying to crack jokes, and it wasn't him, as far as I was concerned. Because I've seen Chris in other stuff as well. I was like, no, that's not him, And then when he just tried to be himself, that's when he became the Doctor, as far as I'm concerned. But David Tennant got it on day one. The episode 1, he got his kind of Doctor down. And that I got to take my hat off to him if I had one. I'll take my hat off to David Tennant. David Tennant, yeah.
I remember when it was so frustrating in Christmas Invasion when he's asleep for most of the episode.
Most of the time.
But the times when he was awake, when he tells Jackie to shut up, and he just looks at her with that thing. And then the old sword fight and the Lion King reference. It was genuinely really funny, and you just couldn't help but warm to him.
As I said, right, I don't think he copied anyone. He's obviously before he became the Doctor, he was a huge fan of Doctor Who, so he must have envisioned himself being the Doctor. Everyone has, me, you, Dan. Do you know what I mean? So he must have brought that vision that he had of himself, if he was the Doctor, to this, and then. When he was fully the Doctor, is when he goes up to the Prime Minister and he says those I can stop you with 4 words or 3 words. I can't remember how many words he said, and that was the Doctor to me, and I was on board right across the board, and it didn't affect me as much as Starry Eyed when Chris went to David, because as I said, I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's move it along. Let's move it along. Let's get somebody. It
was better when he was in his when he got his own costume. It did feel a bit like an imposter until the end when he says fantastic to Rose at the end and holds her hand, and I thought, okay.
But it's a shame.
Can you imagine, Sarah, somebody handing you Sarah, the job, the part that you'd been playing maybe in your bedroom or the back garden or over the park with your friends since you were like 7, 8 years old? Okay, here it is. What are you going to do with it? You can see why he would have been anxious, can't you?
Well, yeah, it daunting task, and and he is a fan, so he knows what had come before. But he took it seriously. As much fun as it is, however much as a fan and a geek he is, and he is a serious actor. And you've got to take it seriously. And when he's playing the Doctor, he's not pretending.
Yeah.
And you can tell the difference.
Yeah. And as the 10th incarnation of the Doctor, he led Doctor Who through an astonishingly popular run under Russell T Davies as the showrunner. Award-winning, headline-making era of Doctor Who that the nation flocked to in their millions. And yet there was a run of 3 series and several specials, and with David Tennant's 10th Doctor right at the centre of it, he was one of the biggest, best-known faces on TV that everybody seemed to love, whether it was little kids or little old ladies. Everybody seemed to know who he was and flocked to that show to see David Tennant do his thing and to play his childhood hero his way, which I suppose, there's no way that he could have foresaw how successful it would be. But I think that perhaps having Russell's work obviously would have given him a fair idea of where to take it. But his faith in him too, that it was in safe hands. I'd love to know how much to and fro there was between them. I mean, I've always viewed this incarnation as a little bit of a sort of Columbo type figure, but just with more product in his hair. He's part sort of detective and part supply teacher. And at first glance, he is that classical, not so much swaggering hero. I think Eccleston got the swagger, but certainly the running hero at breakneck speed, but a classic symbol of what they called in the noughties, Sarah, geek chic. Do you remember that expression, geek chic? So this Doctor, he's the first one who, for a lot of women, they meet him and they're all over him. You see, Martha's eyes are practically out on stalks, aren't they? So a lot of women are instantly attracted to this guy, but yet he's outwardly geeky too. So this Doctor, this alien, he knows the lyrics to Ghostbusters, Ian. More to the point, he's not afraid to sing them back to you if you start it off. And that's not something that we'd seen with the character before, I think. An embracing of pop culture.
And he knew Back to the Future as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned it in one episode. So there you go. But the thing about David Tennant, as I said, right, I was quite impressed with the first, not the first episode, the episodes following. He is his own man. He doesn't try to copy. If you look at, say, for instance, you look at Colin Baker. Don't even talk to me about Sylvester. I don't know what Doctor he was, but anyway, he was basically coming off. I know people don't like. Anyway, he was coming off the other.
We're going to get you on the McCoy show. We're going to get you on that review.
It's not. I don't have anything against the man. I just didn't like the way he played the Doctor. But I'm just saying that if you look at Colin Baker and then you look at the Doctor before him, You know, they're very much a type, aren't they? They're very much the classic Doctor type. But David came in and he was gurning and he was shouting, and you know what I mean. So he was his own thing, which is quite good. And then after that, we had Matt, who had his own thing as well. So, but I think Matt was on the same wavelength as David, but he refined it. He refined his.
I think they both did. I think, David Tennant. I think sometimes he was up right on the cusp of perhaps over egging it a little in what he was doing, but because he was clearly having so much fun with it, Sarah, because the character was having fun too. I think now and again we saw the Ninth Doctor have fun, but not the way the 10th Doctor does. He has fun and he allows himself to. You see him wallowing now and again, but generally speaking, he has fun. I think the catchphrase "allons-y," which is never, I have to be honest, it's never really appealed to me.
No,
I always have to look it up and remind myself what it means, but it means "let's go." So why he doesn't just say "let's go"? I don't know, but I suppose.
That these catchphrases, they're rubbish.
I like it.
They're from the mind of Russell T Davies, I suppose, aren't they? But you have to wonder, rather than so when he's saying "let's go," allons-y, is he? Because every time he does do that, so invariably the stakes are up really, really high and probably as bad as they could possibly get. So it's as if every time he does that, he says "let's go." What I feel he could be saying is, just let go of your doubts, your inhibitions, your fears, and plunge headlong into this, and use everything within your power to bring this to a satisfactory conclusion, to save as many lives as you can, have as much fun as possible, and to give the people watching the best of times. And that's what I feel. And that's what I feel about this. I'm not joking when I talk about the Russell. When I talk about the Russell T Davies era, this is my favourite era of the show. I just get it, or it gets me. It's exactly in line with how I view this character and view this universe. So I do get a bit gushy when it comes to it, because this incarnation of the Doctor, Sarah, he's having more fun on the outside, but he forgets that he never dealt with his S from before. I think that's also a theme, because now and again it catches up with him, and that's when you see how good an actor David Tennant really is.
Yeah, and I love those moments when the mask slips. And because he can be really unassuming. And I mean, Matt Smith played on it even more, because he went for like the trouting, bumbling, "Oh, I'm an idiot, but I'm really a genius." But David used to do it as well, but then suddenly it'd go from just laughing and being happy-go-lucky to just dark.
Yeah.
And the one that always sticks out to me is Family of Blood.
Yeah.
And you get that taste of what what a Time Lord, the power it's got, because I don't think it was actually really addressed in the New Way before that. We kind of know that the Time Lords are powerful, but it's kind of just him on his own. Yes, we know he's clever, he's resourceful, he's witty, but seeing what he can actually do if you do cross him, it was really eye-opening. And the fact that he'd hidden away to protect them, and it was a real, like Eccleston in Dark, it was a real like sit up and take.
But you can understand why he ran away, because he didn't want to be like the Time Lords. You can imagine the Time Lords, judge, jury, and executioner as well. If they want to be, they have too much power, and in my head canon, this is the reason why he ran away. He did not want to be like them. He is the one Time Lord that didn't want to be all powerful, all consuming, which he could be, which it showed in that episode that you just mentioned, Dan. He really did give it to them at the end. Do you know what I mean? With no remorse whatsoever. So that just goes to show what he could have been if he stayed in Gallifrey. Do you know what I mean? So.
Simon Horton often talks about the 10th Doctor, Ian, and he says that during this era, and I think that he enjoys it to some respects, but he's not a major fan. And the reason that he gives is that he feels that the character of the 10th Doctor is exactly the same in the Christmas Invasion as he is at the conclusion, at the end of time, that the character never alters, never develops at all. And
that's not true.
I think that I was wondering what he means by that, and I've spoken to Simon about this several times, and I think he's right in that David Tennant's choices in bringing the character to the screen remain largely the same. There's a few surprises now and again, but I do think that the character evolves. I think it's there on the page, and David Tennant enjoys himself exploring that material, and so therefore so do we.
Yeah. But the thing is that David Tennant he can only be the Doctor what's written on the page. He can only be that what's written on the page. You know what I mean? So it's not David Tennant's fault if Simon thinks he hasn't developed. I personally think he did develop. You know, he went from Chris Eccleston Doctor to being in love, to having that great loss of losing his love, and then right across the board to trying to avoid the regenerating, being angry that his as the woman says, his song is ending. Do you know what I mean? You know, I don't want to go. Do you know what I mean? He's developed. He's gone from being, this powerful person that was in love to the point where he thinks he hasn't done enough. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bittersweet ending for the 10th Doctor, because the 10th Doctor thought he didn't do enough when he was this version. And so, by default, he has developed. If whether Simon likes it or not.
I agree. And
we're chatting about one particular installment of the 10th Doctor's era on this edition of the show, something that came quite late in that run. So there'd been those 3 full series, and then that set of specials. At the time, this seemed like it was unprecedented, and a TV series that was at the height of its popularity, and an actor at the height of his powers in what appeared to be the role of a lifetime. I remember there was a lot of bewilderment out there from the British public saying, that they're taking this off now, right now, really, for all this time. This is all that we're going to get. Yeah. But we were served an Easter special. That's what that's what we're going to get stuck into on this edition of the show. So that's coming up in a couple of minutes. But in the meantime, if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or 2 away on the device of your choice if you know where to look. There's a whole continuum's worth of reviews, previews, interviews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular panelists and some pretty awesome guests. In fact, we know there's something for every fan over at type40.podbean.com. More about that a little later on, as well as that window where we will make contact with that matrix of all knowledge we call the Fandom Podcast Network. Kev's waiting, primed, with lots of news about all the other treats for the ears that are on offer from all the other shows in the FPN family. So listen out for that later. Okay, so we're all aboard. The shop is out of eggs. Well, I've got some cashew nuts kicking about here as we get stuck into this. It could be a bumpy ride. We'll see when we get stuck into our review of Planet of the Dead. Okay, so here we are. This is the episode Planet of the Dead. I hadn't seen this for years. I've watched it this week, and fortunately, our starry-eyed girl, Sarah Graham, she's on hand with a quick reminder for you guys.
Yes. So just to jog your memory, the blurb is, when a London bus takes a detour to an alien world, the Doctor must join forces with the extraordinary Lady Christina. But the mysterious planet holds terrifying secrets hidden in the sand, and time is running out as the deadly swarm gets closer. Ooh, dramatic.
This is the bit where we go, dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun. So, this was the second of those 5 special episodes of Doctor Who that were broadcast between Christmas 2008 and New Year's Day 2010. Wow, that seems like such a long time ago. Planet of the Dead was broadcast on the 11th of April 2009 on BBC One and BBC HD. It was the first episode of Doctor Who that was made in HD. I think they'd made Torchwood. I think Torchwood had always been made in HD. Yes. They hadn't tested it out as such, but I think they didn't feel confident enough. Russell T Davies had said Doctor Who will never be made in 3D while in HD whilst he was on it. But yeah, in next to no time, they were doing it. And this one stars David Tennant as the Doctor with special guest star Michelle Ryan as Lady Christina. At the time, Ian, Michelle Ryan was one of the best-known faces on British TV as well, wasn't she? I wouldn't say she'd grown up on television, but she'd been tremendously successful, hadn't she, on EastEnders?
She was on EastEnders. I can't remember who she played. I never watched EastEnders.
Zoe Slater.
Yeah, I remember
Zoe Slater, yeah.
I remember looking at her thinking she's a handsome woman. And then I remember watching, I can't remember what channel it was at the time because, streaming things had just started or was on the cusp of it. And I remember her being cast as the Bionic Woman, a remake of the Bionic Woman in the States. And it only went for one season because it really didn't do very well. But she was, her acting had gotten better in this American version.
Jekyll as well. Stephen Moffat wrote. I remember watching that.
Yeah, she's an accomplished actress. She's a very good actress as far as I'm concerned. But yeah,
it was 6 years on EastEnders playing Zoe Slater. They really put the character through the ringer there. And as you say, she's gone on to great success. She's never really been off stage or television, and she's done. I think she was in Merlin on the BBC for a few years. Recurring role.
The baddie. She played.
Did that Jekyll and Hyde show? Yeah, so she's done. People say she's the kind of actress where people say whatever happened to Michelle Ryan. But I think if you're asking that, you've not been paying enough attention. I think she is out there, and maybe one day, maybe she'll return to the role of Zoe Slater because a lot of people do tend to. But I think, she seems to have had quite a nice career doing lots of different parts, which I suppose is what any actor really wants to do. Ideally, you want to get out there and play as many characters as possible, rather than the same old. And this story was written by Gareth Roberts and Russell T Davies. So this is the first time in the revived series we had a pair up of writers contributing to the script. Gareth Roberts.
Which one's
Gareth Roberts. Gareth Roberts is the man on the right. So Gareth Roberts, he'd contributed several scripts already. He'd started out writing Doctor Who novels, then multiple episodes of the TV show under just himself on his own.
Right.
And he wrote for the Sarah Jane Adventures too, but he was also a soap opera writer. He wrote for comedy series too. He wrote scripts for the Fast Show and a Swiss Tony, that kind of spin-off from that. So this is a man who's been around for quite a long time. So here he was writing with Russell T Davies on a very different story. I think the stories he'd written up to now had been kind of historical. So The Unicorn and the Wasp was one of his, and the Shakespeare Code. So it had all been along a similar lines. This was almost the complete opposite of that. And it was written by Gareth Roberts and Russell T Davies and directed by James Strong. So it's one of 7 episodes directed by James Strong, who became better known, I think, for his work on Broadchurch. He was nominated for a BAFTA, Best Director BAFTA for Broadchurch in 2015, and directed things like Harbour City and Doctors and some Torchwoods as well. So James Strong's been around for quite a while as well. This episode's got a distinctive look, I think. And what's the script? As I say, I think it's different to anything Gareth Roberts had done otherwise, Ian. It's there's a lot in it, and yet there's not very much in it at all. You think there's very, very few characters, and yet when you look at the story and what it's doing, Sarah, for an hour's worth of TV on the BBC on a bank holiday Monday, it's quite a tall order it's asked to deliver, isn't it?
You forget that, it was an hour and not, 40, 45 minutes. But again, I think the pacing's really well done. It just flies through, scene after scene. And I always think this would have made quite a good Christmas special. It's got that romp, that adventure, and you got the heist bit at the beginning with Christina, And just something a little bit different to draw you in. I always like the pre-credit sequences. But yeah, you've got aliens, you've got bug-eyed monsters, you've got wormholes,
Flies.
you've got guns. You've got Lee Evans. you've got the comedy. You've got Michelle Ryan as the sexy, sassy companion, and she's very. She reminds me a bit of Ramona. She's kind of got that elitist kind of, something completely different to what we'd had before, and then at the end. We get that little hook into what's going to lead us into
Your
the next
song
specials.
is about to end.
Mystery.
Well,
so yeah, you got a bit of everything.
They really did make a big deal about getting Michelle Ryan for this because, as I say, people were very, very fond of her. Very beautiful, very charismatic woman. And in this episode, they give her a really juicy part to play. And as you say, you've got the initial opening sting where the character of Lady Christina D'Souza is seen raiding the Natural History Museum there, which was actually, now you may find this difficult to believe, Ian, but that wasn't the Natural History Museum. They
really? It
was Cardiff.
It was the National Museum of Cardiff. Yes, strangely enough. But when I watched this, I haven't seen this in a number of years. I think that when I look back through the episode list of which episodes are which and which I've watched the most. Of all the David Tennant stuff, this is right at the bottom. And I think it's partly because it's not part of a series. What I tend to do when I get into a run of Doctor Who is I watch everything that was on in a particular year. And this sort of sits outside of all of that, I think. And so I just haven't got back to it.
It gets overshadowed by Waters of Mars, definitely, and obviously the regeneration, and what came before the next Doctor is we had all that, a few months of Russell trolling us with a potential, replacement for David Tennant, because obviously at that point we knew he was going, and we had that, is David Morrissey going to be the new Doctor, and there was all that, and this kind of just gets.
And it was all in the media, though, wasn't it, Sarah? Yeah. So the media was preoccupied with either what had come before or what was coming afterwards. So this sitting there at Easter, it's quite inconspicuous. But I have to say that pressing play on this, just on the night again, now all these years on, it's just okay. I'm going to have my fix of an hour's worth of Doctor Who. I'm going to get wrapped up in this story for this hour for what it is. I immediately just fell into it, and the momentum of it. I just found it really, really engaging. The character of the 10th Doctor. Again, this isn't any great innovation on what we'd seen before or what we'd see afterwards. But this is the character as I remembered it, holding some big dopey gadget in his long coat, flirting, but yet not flirting, not seemingly aware that he's flirting, and being quite stoic at certain points. Tennant can just tap into that instantly. He can do those handbrake turns, and with a supporting cast of characters who I just really, really liked. So you mentioned Lee Evans earlier on. We'll come to him later on. But there was also Noma Dumawenzi as Captain Magambo. So there was her too. There was Victoria Alcock. She was playing Angela Whittaker. David Ames is in it as Nathan. We've got Ellen Thomas playing Carmen. Reginald Tezebo plays Lou. Daniel Kaluuya plays Barclay. And Keith Parry plays the bus driver, who may not stick around. He's got sort of arrow fodder painted across his belly practically from the start.
He's a red shirt, isn't he?
A red shirt, that's it.
How gruesome was that death?
A lot more gruesome than I remember it being. He literally bursts into, we see his sort of flesh sizzle and everything, don't we? Because the bus driver, he said, I'm not having this when the bus is taken away to an alien world. What's my gaffer going to say? It's the whole Jolly Boys Out in Fools and Horses thing. What's my gaffer going to say about this? So he decides to jump back through the hole, doesn't he? The space vortex thing, and gets fried right in front of everybody. Shouldn't laugh. But it's a nice little part. These are memorable Doctor Who deaths, I think, Ian. And when Doctor Who's working properly, it's bumping people off like that in a non-horrific way. I think this is kind of borderline, but this is the kind of thing that sends the kids behind the sofa, or when they go to bed, it just stays with them for just that little bit Just that little bit.
I do like the guest stars. I like the guy from Get Out. He was in it, wasn't he? The black
That's
guy.
right. That's
Yeah.
Daniel Kaluuya playing Barclay.
He was quite good, and
Fantastic actor.
and Lee Evans, as far as I'm concerned, is a genius when it comes to comedy. And I actually laughed out loud when I first saw this episode with him. And quite frankly, I was disappointed when they replaced him with the girl. I can't remember the girl's name. It was obvious that.
I know who you mean. In a later era. I think it's easy to forget now quite how popular Lee Evans was. Him appearing in this in 2009 was kind of towards the end of a career. Lee Evans is now retired, but he certainly throughout the 90s, he was easily the most popular, high-profile, and I'd say the highest earning stand-up comedian in Britain. He was absolutely huge, wasn't he? He was packing them in, a really, really big name who appeared in Hollywood movies. And he decided, in the end, to pack it all in for the family life. This was one of his later roles, really. He's about 60 years of age now, and he rarely works. I think he does the odd charity gig now. But it's lovely to see him in this, having so much fun in such a memorable character. Well, I think that, Ian, there's something actually. You're a guy who you cast actors and things on your productions. There's often a phrase that I hear said is that there are no small parts, only small actors. And again, you mentioned earlier on the guy from Get Out, Daniel Kaluuya here playing Barclay. He doesn't save it. He's only in a handful of scenes, but we know instantly who that character is. And Russell's great at writing parts like that, but it's the actor too, isn't it? He knows exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, he kind of chewed his scenery, didn't he? He made it work for himself. But just talking about Lee Evans, there's a story that they were so enamored with him, the Americans, they told him to just go and write a script and they'll finance it. And really? So Lee Evans went in the hotel room and he sat there and he was there for days and he couldn't think of anything. And then he rang his wife and he said, look, I'm sitting here, I don't know what to write. And his wife said to him, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to come home. And she said, come home then. And that's the end. That he drew the line under Hollywood. And that was it. Apparently that's a true story. When he was at the top of his game, he just couldn't find a reason to stay there. Do you know what I mean? Because remember, he made films like, was it the Mouse thing, with those big stars
Mousetrap.
In it? And Mousetrap. He was in, what is it? Mary, what is it? What's that one called?
Something About Mary.
Something About Mary. He was huge. He was on top of his game.
Diaz.
And at that point, he decided that he didn't want it anymore and he preferred his family. So, I mean, good on him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
God bless him for that.
In this, he plays Professor Malcolm Taylor, who's a unit scientist who is in awe of the Doctor. He seems to be sort of following his work a little. In his footsteps, I suppose. He's another scientific advisor kind of character. But he also serves as a foil for Captain Magambo. So this is Noma Mwenza. She's back playing a character she'd initially played in Turn Left. And she develops, and Turn Left that's a heavy episode. Certainly a lot heavier than this, isn't it, Sarah? But her character develops quite a lot in this story. And the pairing of her with Professor Malcolm Taylor, that is really charged, isn't it? Because we see they've got a very nice working relationship. He's the quirky one, she's the no-nonsense one. But he shows where his lines in the sand are, where she tells him, okay, you can't help the Doctor anymore. He's on his own.
Well, that wasn't the reason. The reason was that, look, she has to protect the planet Earth. And if the Doctor is saying that this is coming, might as well shut the thing down now.
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. So, so she got her lines in the sand, her duty, and he'd got what he viewed as his duty and where he was placing his faith. And this is what I love about Doctor Who, and this is something I think that the best of science fiction does. Original Star Trek did this all the time, and TNG, and that they'd show you that the two people on screen, they'd illustrate their positions, the situations they were in, and placed you in both their shoes. So what call would I make? Is he right or is she right? Is she wrong or is he wrong? And it leaves you with that hanging in the air to the moment where Captain Magambo pulls a gun on Taylor, and it makes you in such a breezy, romp like this, because that's what this is. It's a caper. It's a romp. It's romancing the stone. It's that kind of movie done for TV. But to get a moment like that in the middle of something like this, played by two great actors, I think there's real power in that.
I think I wouldn't go that far, but
for a family show, I'm talking
in
relative terms.
I don't know. I see Doctor Who very different.
It's not training day. I'm not saying this is something. I'm not saying this is like heavy, but we're talking about this is a kid show. This is families. It's not 5
kids are
6
far more
o'clock.
intelligent.
It suddenly gets mistakes are.
Yeah, I know that, but as I said, even I still will say this till my dying day until they change it. Doctor Who still needs to grow up. It really does, right? Even when it went to Capaldi, it still needs to grow up, and I still will maintain this. It still needs to grow because kids are far more intelligent than we ever were.
I don't think it's a question of being intelligent, Ian. I think it's a question of knowing where your boundaries are and catering to all kinds of different kids, the kind of kids who may play Call of Duty to entertain them, but also the kids who maybe don't watch or read anything else that's geeky to reach them. It's as mainstream a show as you could possibly get. So it can only grow up so. I personally think this hits everything.
Dan, I'm not saying they should show violence and all that. I know what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that
I think this is really grown up.
I don't know, the style of the show, like for instance, the main problem I had with this, even when I was first watching it, and even, oh God, there we go, Ian's got one. When I was first watching it, and even watching it now, was the music. I hated the music. They have a disco music when she's trying to get when she's coming down on the wire in the beginning. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there, I'm going like, now there's 4 guards and they're not facing the prize. What the hell is that all about? Why are they? Do you know what I mean? That's what I mean. It needs to grow up. It needs to take the logical thing inside what they're doing and make it logical. Why would you have 4 guards?
I think there's something when I describe the 10th Doctor and the Russell T Davies era as comic booky earlier on.
This is cleverer than this.
This is but they are illustrated on the page. They are broad. I think there's something of the Looney Tunes about the Russell T Davies era, and to a lesser extent the Stephen Moffat era, where you think, oh, don't go there. Look, it's behind you. They're behind you. They're coming. I think it's all absolutely deliberate. The music cues, the choices of Murray Gold. Sarah's a massive fan.
It can do no wrong with me.
I know.
What you're honing in on there, though, is actually a staple of a lot of noughties telly. I think this is getting to the point now where it's TV from a past age, which does look more conspicuous now, Sarah. What do you think?
It does, yeah. It's.
I think you're wrong, because when you look at the Americans stuff of sci-fi, they didn't have disco music.
Oh,
they
did.
Was a tense scene, right? Like for instance, Doctor Who. They knew when they look back at this, they knew that music was wrong, because when you watch the Matt Smith's ones, the music had improved. Murray Gold was improving as he went along.
Recently, Ian.
That's a stylistic choice, though, because I remember an interview with Murray, and he was saying that Stephen uses silence much more. Whereas I think in the RTD era, there is this thing of it's not exactly a musical, but it's like there's everything's got a musical accompaniment. See, I just took it to me. For me, I mean, I'm probably reading too much into it. Nerd. But to me, it was like it was all about Christina. Her personality, because she's not doing it.
Yeah.
She is stealing, but she's doing it because she's an adrenaline junkie. It's the adventure.
Still wrong, though.
So the thing was like, oh, I'm having a good time, rather than the.
No,
that's how I view it. That's how I view it as well. It's almost as if it's almost as if up to a point she's playing. I think this character plays the odds. I think she's deliberately daring. I think that her life as an aristocrat or whatever she's supposed to be, because again, she's a very comic book character. She's Silver Sable, for example, in Marvel Comics, or Catwoman in DC Comics. It's really quite broad, And so we see her be daring in that way. I think it's very, very charming.
Can I say something,
and for
Dan?
me,
I just want to say one thing, right? I wonder how many takes they did of this when the guy had to go with a broom and try and get rid of all their steps as they're going down the sand, trying to get rid of it. All right, I've got to do another take, and then somebody has to kind of get rid of all those steps. That would be hilarious, wouldn't it? Absolutely hilarious.
I mean, coming to watch this now after such a long gap, I was surprised how entertaining it was in its own right.
Yeah.
But for all that I've said about this era and of this time, this era of the show means the world to me because of the age that my children were. This was at the height of its popularity. They were maximum invested in this and collecting the Battles in Time cards, all of that. So it was a real cultural event. So I enjoyed it for that on that respect. But having said that, this was also the first time that I've been back to new series Doctor Who and been aware of not just that music and costume choices, deliberate choices, I maintain they did that deliberately, are products of their time, but I was also aware for the very first time how cheap it looked. It did look really, really cheap.
About the masks?
No, I mean the production values.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm talking generally. So sets were really quite small. Costumes were nicely put together, but perhaps not as elaborate as they would be now. They're not augmented in the same way that they would be now, a decade and a half on. I think the lighting too has a kind of noughties look to it. The color palette, everything looks of a certain time. For example, when the bus goes through the vortex, all they really do is what the original series of Star Trek had been doing since the 60s. They shake the camera around, they shake the bus around, they shake the actors around. Nothing else really happens. And yet you get totally invested in it, totally wrapped up in it. But as I say, this is the first time, because things have come on so much for television in the time in between. This is the first time that I've gone back to a new series episode. I thought, okay, now I see why some people, Ian mainly, say, "Oh, this was still so cheap." I didn't see this as cheap at the time, but I do understand now. You can see its budgetary limits now in a way that I probably couldn't before.
It wasn't so bad. The production value wasn't so bad. It was the way. I mean, obviously they're out on the street when they're on Earth, and they're in the sand dune when they're in another planet. The sets for the bug people weren't very impressive at all. It's like they just threw everything, and whatever sticks. You know what I mean? It was just a bit rubbish. But I mean, this set was quite good. I thought with Lee Evans, I thought was quite good, and I love the idea he has his fingerless gloves as well. So I think added to his character and stuff like that. And
well, in my view, that kind of character, Sarah, it's, for all that I said that it's comic booky, it's not too much. It's not cosplay.
Oh no, it's and he's got his serious moments as well. I mean,
it's a proper character. It's a rounded character.
When he gets that gun pointed at him. He's scared, but he's got his principles and he's standing up for them.
He's willing to die for the Doctor. So there you go. Yeah,
there's real power in that. And the actress who plays Captain Magambo, Noma Dumawenza, a British actress, she won in 2006. In 2006, she won the Laurence Olivier Award for Best Performance in a Supporting Role. That was for a stage role that she had. And in recent years, she's won another Laurence Olivier Award as Best Actress for her role as Hermione Granger in that run of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And she took that role to Broadway as well. So I looked at her and I thought, I know I've seen her in other things, but I couldn't quite place her. I wonder what she's done since. And she has gone on to great success. And Lee Evans has gone into retirement. So it's the strangest thing. And some of the other actors too, as you say, the guy who's gone into Get Out, and Victoria Alcock too. She'd been in Bad Girls for a few years. I think she's been in EastEnders too. So just nice actors in good parts. And they know which end of the deal is theirs. They know their characters inside out. all adds colour to the thing. I love the old couple sat there on the bus together. You know, they're probably eating a pack of digestives, Sarah. That kind of, we all know a couple like that, don't they? Just really relatable sort of aunts and uncles or grandparent types. And these broad strokes, this is what I like about the Russell T Davies era, because they're characters that everybody says, you know, I know those people. I recognise those people. I went to school with them, or they live next door. Or, do you see what I'm saying? This is why it chimes with me.
It does, and also again, just another brilliant component of the 10th Doctor is for how much alien he is. He takes time with the little people, with the humans, when he's sat and they're all despondent, and he sits them all down and says, what have you got waiting for you at home? What are you looking forward to? Pork chops and gravy, and he remembers all these little details. He remembers the names. And it's so human and so touching. And again, it's just another wonderful element to it, because some doctors weren't like that. Some doctors just went off, I'm going to save the world. You just sit there and shut up. I'm going to sort it out.
I suppose that all the doctors can probably read people like that, but some of them are content to keep it to themselves and think, okay, well, I won't handle this situation like that. Whereas others, the more humanistic, the ones that are more interested in people, are going to use that skill set to resolve the situation and to just make people feel better.
Again, and it's just a wonderful, relatable thing, because we'd like to think that we'd all be cool going on an adventure, but most of us would be. You can see
the panic. You can see the panic in their eyes, and obviously when the bus driver is killed, you think, okay, dramatically, why that works so well is because one of the other characters has to sort of become empowered to get behind that wheel. We can invest in somebody else and will her to succeed when things start to get worse and worse and worse and worse. You mentioned earlier on, Ian, the aliens, the bug-eyed monsters in the boiler suits, the tritovores. They're fun characters, aren't they? They're more anthropomorphic. I knew I was going to struggle with that. Okay. Take 5.
They're bugs.
Anthropomorphizing of animals into human form. Russell T Davies did a lot of that too. We've got cats, we've got rhinos. Here we have insects. Here we have insects. It's a nice shorthand, because when I think of insects, you think of fussy little creatures, kind of like Jawas in Star Wars, that busy themselves doing bits and bobs. And I do wonder, because obviously they're in the desert as well, could that have been part of it? A lot of the press surrounding this, I don't know if you remember this, focused on the fact that the scenes in the desert were filmed in Dubai. I think the trip to Dubai with the bus, I think they'd got 2 buses. They'd got a stunt bus and an actual bus, and so they did this. So shipping this bus off to Dubai and doing this location filming, which does look spectacular. I think that's where most of the cash may have gone in.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, I did enjoy this episode. There's loads of things that I obviously didn't like, and still to this day, I still think Doctor Who needs to correct. But it was enjoyable as far as I was concerned. David Tennant was David Tennant, as always, as the Doctor. But for me, the highlight is Lee Evans. I think Lee Evans stole the show, in my opinion.
He did, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, he was very funny, and the Malcolms thing, 12 Malcolms and stuff like that. That was really funny as well. Really well written, in fact. I don't know if that came from Moffat or the other guy, but I found it very funny. And also, he wasn't a dope either, because he was the one that came with the solution to a particular problem for David Tennant. So
I always liked that character, Ian, but he stood out far more for me watching it this time.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because my tastes have changed and what I latch onto has changed?
Yeah,
or do you think it's because in the meantime we've seen a lot of characters that are quite similar to Malcolm Taylor done quite badly, and so to see a character like this played with a lot of layers is a bit of a novelty now?
I don't know. I obviously this is stunt casting, as some people put it, but it's very
Perhaps.
good casting because,
Yeah.
as I said, you know, to me he stole immediately when he turned around and it was Lee Evans. I thought, oh, Lee Evans, how great is that? And then he delivered. You know, the lines that he said, the stuff that the way he was performing was quite funny. You know, the bit where he's going, you know, he's trying to talk to him. He's gone. Okay, he's gone. He puts the phone down. I thought that was quite amusing, stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? And Michelle Ryan was, you know, easy for the eyes for this episode, which is quite cool. I think Doctor Who's always had that thing about, you know, good looking
For the eyes.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah, you know, I just think that this episode was really good. The only things that let it down, in my opinion, was the music and some of the visual effects, as you say, Dan. Maybe some of the production values were a bit lower. But obviously, you just said it, that they spent a lot of money going to Dubai, you know, with the bus and stuff like that. So that maybe took a big chunk of the budget, you know. So
they really did, and it was.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was a disaster, but I think it's quite well known that the bus sustained severe damage when a crane accidentally dropped a shipping container, onto the bus at the port in Dubai City. So the production team had an emergency discussion, and they agreed that the damage was unintentionally artistic, and that it could be included into the plot of the episode, rather than spending the extra money shipping the spare bus that they'd got from Cardiff. They decided to basically to go with it. I think they beat parts of it back into position, but included the damage into the story. And, you know, it's one of those things now as fans, you know, we know that these things happened, but it's only when you're in the know about little facts like that, Sarah, that they're ever in your head. The average audience viewer then or now is not going to know or care, are they?
And it works. I actually think it would look weird for the bus to arrive pristine.
Yeah.
Also, there was nobody sitting at the top either. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, that bus was very sparse, let's face it. Come on.
Considering they were supposed to be, I mean, maybe for Cardiff, but for London, you could be right.
London would be full, wouldn't it? I mean, you know, just at the top, people would have been dead at the top, wouldn't they? So, but, you know, I mean, it is a fantasy show, and it is Doctor Who. You know, Doctor Who is full of inconsistencies as far as I'm concerned. You just have to go with it. But it never spoilt my enjoyment watching it. That's the bottom line. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. I still think Doctor Who was riding high here, and it's a shame really, because I think she would have made a good companion for the Doctor. Obviously, he was coming to the end of his era, I guess. But it's a shame they introduced her at this later date, because she could have been quite good.
Michelle Ryan looks like she's having the time of her life, doesn't she? She looks sort of thrilled to be there, I think, Ian, like she's having a brilliant time.
I don't think any of them had the time of their life. I mean, it must have been really hot where they were.
Yeah.
You know, true. I mean, he's wearing a suit, for God's sakes, and she's all dressed in black. Yeah, she's all dressed in black. So it's got it, you know, it must have been hell trying to shoot that, definitely. Then again, craft services would have been nice to them as well. They would have had loads of cold drinks and crap like that. But you know, if you're like me, right, and it's a hot day, in the morning you're full of beans. Well, come the afternoon, all you want to do is sleep. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just thinking David probably wanted to. Oh, I've got to go to sleep. It's too hot, man. Yeah.
I remember feeling frustrated that she wasn't going to carry on. It felt like a missed opportunity.
Yes, what I thought. That's what I thought. And
if it had carried on another season,
yeah,
how fun would it have been to see these two?
And also, she's again, you know, I'd say this again. She's easy on the eye, and that's one of those tropes of the Doctor Who thing, isn't it? That they had companions that were good looking, and you know, for the male audience, obvious it's for the male audience, and you know, and that was the trait. So she would have made a good companion as far as I was concerned.
Yeah,
but then again,
she was already developing, because you know, she was pretty selfish, just doing things for herself, and then you know, the Doctor has to persuade her to give up that golden cup.
Yeah. When he starts banging it.
And you know, she starts to see, you know, doing stuff.
Also, that diamond that they had in the middle of the thing, he didn't need it. He chucked it away. She could have just picked that up, and that she could have.
They needed the clamps to fix them to the bus to make it fly to get them home, rather than the diamond itself. Initially, Lady Christina, she wasn't even in the original drafts for the story. It was going to be a big space opera about a giant war. It was going to feature the Chelonians, who are a race of characters of tortoises. I'm not going to try and say that word again. A race of humanoid tortoises that Gareth Roberts created for the New Adventures books back in the 90s. They were long-standing Doctor Who characters in literature. So it was going to include them. And so the idea was it was going to feature them in a Star Trek pastiche about an outer space hotel with guests disappearing and things like that. And so it ended up being this. Very, very different with Lady Christina there. Just like you say, I think that I could have stood to see this character carry on. But again, that's the beauty of this era. Practically every story includes a character you kind of want to see more of. You wonder, this is one interlude for the Doctor, but I got the impression that Lady Christina had several adventures before and almost certainly would afterwards. And you got that policeman who's sort of following her around, who seems like it was all a bit sort of Dick Dastardly. It's like, I nearly got her this time. It reminds me of McGee from the Incredible Hulk show, Ian. He's the copper who's always on her tail. And that could be a series, Sarah. It could be a series now. I'd probably watch that.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's doing Big Finish.
Doing Big Finish.
I don't know if it's...
That's not canon as far as I'm concerned. Rubbish.
It's canon as far as they're concerned.
Yeah, exactly. They can keep it.
Please let us know in the chat if you've listened to it. I think I could watch, like a detective thing, like a heist thing, but I don't know whether would it translate onto Big Finish? I don't know. I'd be interested to hear people that have listened to it if it does work.
Suppose
and also her accent's very RP, isn't it, in this? Because when you look at her in EastEnders, her accent's completely different.
She's Cockney in that. Yeah. I suppose the important part of this relationship is the point that it takes the Doctor to. So another powerful moment that we get in this, right at the end, pretty much, is she assumes that she's going along for a ride in the TARDIS once they get back to Earth safely through the wibbly wobbly Stargate thing. So she just walks up to the TARDIS and says, okay, in we go. And the Doctor is absolutely firm that he will never take another companion on board the TARDIS. And when she asks him why, he says it's because he's lost all the previous ones. Mm-hmm. And this is what I mean about David Tennant's acting choices there. Yes, technically the character is the same, but this is the kind of depth that wouldn't have been possible just a couple of seasons before, because a line like that wouldn't have had the same power. I mean, people who've been watching since the classic series may feel that way, say, oh yeah, he lost Adric, he lost Tigger, he lost Leela.
He lost the TARDIS.
But you see what I'm saying? In that era, at that cultural time, we'd followed this character for 4 series.
Remind me, Dan, what companion did he lose up to this point? Because
I think he means he lost them all. That he lost all those connections. Those connections that he'd made with those people, they were now lost for a variety of different reasons. So with Donna, with her memory, he had to lose her. With Martha, she couldn't stay with him anymore because
she was in love with him. That's
clearly defined reasons. Yeah. Rose, they were literally torn apart.
But she's happy now because she's got another Doctor.
Yeah. So I think that's what he means. And so when he says that, even though it seems harsh, you think, well, no, I can't blame you. I don't blame you, mate. I completely agree. I see why you would make that choice. And at the end of the day, she is still a wrong one. You do,
she's a wrong one.
You do cheer when he uses the sonic screwdriver to get her out of the handcuffs. You think that's a very naughty thing to do.
I didn't cheer. I just thought that was stupid. I thought, do you know what? Right, she's a thief. She's getting arrested. Why did he free her? There was no. I don't understand. He's the morals there are completely.
I think that he believes that. I think he believes that he's redeemed her to some. That he set her back on a better course That's knowing the character. I'm not saying he's right, Sarah, but I think that's what he believes. Do you know what I mean?
He doesn't apply. He doesn't. I guess he doesn't. The way we think as humans, the Doctor doesn't really think that way. I guess. That's an excuse, I guess, because I just thought that was illogical towards the end, and she should have really got arrested for. She's probably stole loads of artifacts. She needs to go to jail. She needs to learn her lesson. But the Doctor set her free, and she flew off on a bus. So what the hell? What the hell is going on there?
Another thing I'd forgotten about this is how much of a unit story it was. Units are pretty much a constant presence all the way through, and done quite well as well. I think both personnel, very memorable characters.
The Brigadier, though. I know. I wanted the Brigadier to be.
I think that this captain is the closest that we've probably got to that kind of presence. Who's an actor, an actress who's got charisma.
She reminded me a lot of Bombera.
Who?
Yeah. In Battlefield. You won't know because it's in the Toy Story.
It's practically the same character, both in every physically and in her personality.
But she's quite small, isn't she? Because remember that bit where you first see her and all the soldiers are like with the guns, and she's like little tiny girl comes out there. It's like, Mom. Yeah. It's like really small. I'm like, oh, okay. How did she pass her physical? I don't know, but there you go. So yeah. So I don't know.
I had to laugh when the swarm's coming out and they shoot him and the guns actually work.
Yeah.
Smile.
Yeah. I actually, I was really happy to see because a unit was introduced with the Santarans, wasn't it?
That's Time Warrior.
Yeah. And I was really happy to see unit back, and my heart sunk when they didn't have the Brigadier there because obviously you want to see the Brigadier still there, even though he's retired, still there, assisting, but we couldn't have that though. Anyway,
it could have just been a little.
I thought it would be great because we got the what is it school reunion with Sarah Jane, and the icing on the cake would have been the Brigadier. Do you know what I mean? Him meeting the Brigadier once more.
Pretty close.
We did.
Poor Nick Courtney was. He was. Because several bouts of being unwell, I think, stopped him from being involved.
Do you remember that scene in it when Matt Smith gets the call and he's told that the Brigadier's just passed, and it really did affect him? He was like, that's
but that really annoyed me, Ian. Because
I know. There we go.
Visiting Craig. Who gives a shit about Craig? You would have had time to see the Brigadier.
I know. This is one of many mistakes, in my opinion, that Moff made and Russell T made. But fair enough. They had to do what they had to do.
It was a lovely shot scene.
Yeah.
Planet of the Dead was the 200th Doctor Who story, which is why the bus was number 200. Well, they said it was the 200th story. This is very much up for debate because, like a lot of things involving numbers and Doctor Who, it's always up for debate. I'm not going to bore you with the ins and outs of that. I think it's best to just take it at face value and say, hey, yeah, this was the 200th Doctor Who story. And there was a corresponding poll that was running Doctor Who magazine around the same time. It's a lot of fun. I remember that when I went to Cardiff, to the Doctor Who experience, and I drove down an underpass to go into the bay, Ian, to head up to go to see all the props and all the rest of it. And I'd heard talk that when you go to, because I hadn't been to Cardiff at that point for several years, certainly not since they'd been filming Doctor Who. So I'd heard talk that there were Doctor Who locations all over this city. But it was literally as soon as I came off the dual carriageway and into the city to go right down the underpass that they use in this episode, and to recognise it instantly was just the strangest thing. It made me think it was broad daylight in my case, but it was still unmistakably the same thing. And I got feels immediately. And so I'm just very, very fond of.
I'll just ask you a question, right? Because the Doctor seems to do this in a lot of episodes, even in Classic. There's a problem. He comes in, nobody knows who he is. He says a couple of words, and everybody gravitates towards the Doctor and listens to him. Do you think the Doctor has something, because he's a Gallifreyan, that kind of resonates out to people that trust
something
him?
Psychic. I think it's just charisma. I think it's charisma. And I think it is also knowing, but not born leadership as such. And it's not even about being the cleverest person in the room, but I think it's about somebody who, I think it's about somebody who speaks with conviction. So it's always when he speaks. It's never just because he's there. It's as soon as he starts speaking, and whatever he's saying, whatever it is he's saying. You see that to a certain extent in this. When Lady Christina first meets him, she just thinks he's some kook. But as soon as she realizes that what he's saying is true, the way that she hears what he is saying to her, that changes, and it changes the way that she perceives him. And it's the same with everybody on the bus. So if you remember in this story, Lady Christina assumes the leadership role, doesn't she? Because she thinks he's just some kooky, geeky bloke who's got on the bus and tried to pull her. So she stands tall and starts telling everybody what to do. But she very quickly realizes that, okay, this guy, he knows the score. He's the one to listen to. And if he says that if he says confidently that he can get us out of it, there's no reason why we shouldn't believe in him, because I've got no ideas.
Well, I don't know. I think there's something that the Doctor has naturally. Maybe it's within the DNA of Gallifreyans that, other species warm towards them.
You meet people like that. You meet people like that in everyday life as well. Some people just have that charisma, or have a warmth, Sarah, that you can just you feel like you can trust them, or you feel like you can talk to them, or they seem like they belong, or sometimes they seem like they don't belong, and that can make people stand out just as much.
I guess in real life, yes. But the stakes ain't that high. Do you know what I mean? If we went through a wormhole, and somebody would you trust that person?
The thing about sci-fi. That's the thing about sci-fi and fantasy, though, isn't it? It amplifies those situations, and shows them through a particular lens, Sarah. So we get this sort of, I won't say a cartoon view of real life, but we get comic book like scenarios, and therefore we get sort of exaggerated reactions. We get contracted complications, implications, and resolutions. That's the nature of genre storytelling, I think, particularly in short form.
I think Christina realized he was more than who he was when he started feeling up the sand and realizing it wasn't sand and stuff like that, because he just went off, didn't he? Walked spooky. Off and he started looking at the sand, and she was like, what is he doing? And then obviously there's that moment where he goes, I'm a lord, I'm from the planet Gallifrey and stuff like that, and that didn't start her at all. So you're an alien, you know, how comes you look like us, but you look like Gallifreyan as well? That dialogue as well. So I mean, they kind of matched each other. Maybe they wouldn't have made a good pairing because they were both kind of on that level, weren't they? So I don't know, but I still think it would, if they had another season, she would have been a great companion. She was quite strong as well as a person, knew exactly what she wanted.
She wasn't insufferable.
No, some bits she was, but I mean, every character is insufferable. I even thought the Doctor was insufferable.
I have to say, I've always kind of overlooked this character based on, it's a terrible thing to say, based on what David Morrissey did earlier, based on what Lindsay Duncan would do in the next one. I have really underestimated what Michelle Ryan was doing here, and that for me counts for the entire episode. This is far better than I remember it being. It's easily the David Tennant story that I've seen the least, and whilst on one hand it is really quite cheap and quite predictable, particularly if you're an older viewer, but I was delighted by how inventive, ambitious, funny, and I'm going to say it again, and edgy I think this really was. I'm not sure whether it was always that. I do. I think I think there was moments of real power here, characterization for the Doctor, and the Malcolm and Captain Magambo situation too. I would say that's really, really edgy.
I like that scene.
And Planet of the Dead, I think that's quite a bland title for this as well, which doesn't do it any favors. But I think this is a really pleasing caper with its own energy and own dynamism. Own dynamic and its own dynamic that, as you said, Ian, it does sort of all rotate around the chemistry between David Tennant and Michelle Ryan, and you get some bug-eyed creatures and gizmos and portents and all that kind of thing. What more could you want for an Easter bank holiday, Sarah? What do you think? Have you always loved this?
I think I just kind of dismissed. I enjoyed it for what it was at the time, but I think I was more excited to get to Waters of excited, but also dreading, because the further we went along, the less Tennant we were going to get. But there was that eagerness to see how it was all going to unfold, and Waters of Mars is just, it's a completely different story, but it's. That's the one you remember because it's dark and it was genuinely scary. And but this one, I think you appreciate it more because it's the last time Doctor Who was fun, if you know what I mean. It still was fun, but it was getting more serious. It was getting towards the end. This one and the next Doctor, these two were the last ones where it still felt all jolly and it was just an adventure.
I think Moff and RT, they made sure that the companions weren't just screaming and running around, in peril. Made sure that they had a reason to be in the story, and this is no exception. They made sure that Lady Christina there was a reason for her to be in the story. You know what I mean? And she was quite strong. She wasn't, screaming every moment and stuff like that. She was. The only thing I disagreed with, again, I would say that is the ending where she should have went to jail. She should have been behind bars for what she's been doing. So.
I rolled my eyes when she kissed him because
that was okay. I didn't mind that. Really? But I mean, the thing is, though, it's really strange because, again, I keep saying this, and a lot of people disagree with me. Doctor Who should grow up. It's like the bit where he takes out his sonic screwdriver and he goes, "Oh, don't worry, I'll make the phone work." Blah blah blah. People question it, but then it stopped questioning it. I'd be just sitting there in the bus going, how the hell did he do that? What is up with this guy? What? He's and then he goes to me, "Oh, dig and get the wheels out." I'm like, "No, you dig and get the wheels out. I ain't going to be doing dig and get the wheels out. I'm going with you." Do you know what I mean? It's like things like that.
I think they do. I think they are. But I also believe that on a show like Doctor Who, there's only so many times that you can show those kinds of scenes.
Yeah, I know.
It would happen every single time.
Yeah.
But it would get very, very old quite quickly. And talking about what leans into what comes afterwards, I want to just talk briefly about Ellen Thomas playing Carmen.
What's the chances of the Doctor being on the bus with a psychic person?
Well, yeah, Ellen Thomas
to 1, maybe.
Ellen Thomas has been in everything as well. She was in EastEnders too. Lots of sitcoms, dramas, and stuff like that. Just one of those faces, one of those presences. In here, she plays another person who's got the sight, just like Gwen in the Unquiet Dead. She's got the sight, got a gift. And it works nicely within the context of the episode because it does say she works out that she can hear the sort of screams of the people from the planet who are now sort of atomized as sand. And that's really nasty stuff. But it also gives us this moment at the end of the episode where she's the first person to say to the Doctor, isn't she? He will knock 4 times. So is this the first time we hear that? I can't quite remember.
I think so. She looks like my gran when my gran was alive. I'm telling you, she looks like my gran.
It's a great moment, and she delivers it so well. And I've always been in two minds about the idea of premonitions in Doctor Who, Sarah, because the Doctor, he doesn't believe in ghosts and the supernatural and all that kind of thing, and yet we get premonitions and portents and.
But that's different, isn't it? Because it's a power that somebody has got inside them, rather than believing in something beyond life, that exists. So I mean, I could buy it that she's psychic. I mean, maybe there are people on this planet that's psychic. Who knows? But...
Do you think you think that sits well enough within the Doctor Who universe?
Yeah,
a lot of people feel that it doesn't. You see.
No, I think so. The only thing that doesn't sit well is that it's 1,000,000,000 to 1 that she'd be on the bus with the Doctor. But apart from that, it's fine.
You don't know. She might have been put there by
exactly.
I think it works. After watching the finale of season 4, when you've got all the timelines converging on the destiny that Dr. Donna was supposed to meet and all that, I think. But I do see what you mean. I understand why some fans wouldn't like it because it's more of a kind of science and logic based on concrete.
But it is science, though, isn't it? Because because they haven't discovered it, it's all to do with the person, isn't it? So it's well within the science realm as far as I'm concerned. But beyond life, beyond what we all know, that's beyond science, isn't it? So that's why I guess the Doctor can't connect with that. Then again, he did say, "Let's find God," when when what's his name died, and
that's true.
See, it got me. I was completely invested in it. I was hanging on every word of it. I'm quite a contrarian like that. I got wrapped up in it. It was only afterwards where people said to me, it shouldn't really be there, and I thought, well, maybe you've got a point. I can understand the niggle. I can see why people might have a problem, but it's these kind of things. They just aren't deal breakers for me. They don't get under my skin the way they do.
Works. I think it works because of the reaction of the Doctor, because he doesn't poo-poo it. He actually looks
very worried, doesn't he?
Concerned. So if the Doctor's concerned, we're concerned, and then everybody thought it was the Master.
Everybody always thinks it's the Master or the Rani.
Do you know what, right? Talking about companions, there are some companions that I thought it's a shame they didn't get them to go. Like who's that comedian that played the train guy in the Mummy?
Frank Skinner played Wilkins.
I thought he would be a great companion for the Doctor. He would have been great,
Frank Skinner's been talking about that ever since he played the part, about wanting to have carried on in the role, but
it would have been
sadly,
so amazing.
It was not to be.
Yeah, because he goes, "Oh no, I can't take this."
They definitely had chemistry.
Yeah, they did. They had that thing. I mean, he was very, very logical, wasn't he? The Frank Skinner character, and what's his name was completely mad. If you're going to die, then tell us. Blah blah blah. And I thought that was really off with the Doctor. But I mean, there were loads of companions that I thought could have been quite good if they carried on. And Frank Skinner's one of them.
I always wanted Shona from Last Christmas. I think she wasn't she tipped to replace Clara if Jenna had gone?
Oh, one of them many. Yes, so many characters that they were going to pick up or rumored to be about to pick up. Certainly in some scripts that they stayed behind or they hopped aboard. They used to experiment with that more so in the classic series, but I think some characters were conceived with the idea that well maybe just in case somebody says they don't want to do it again, maybe Jenna Coleman. I think she told them that she was leaving about 5 times. So in that respect, you could probably see why. Now, yes, we're going to go and take a short break. Now, we're going to be back with our rating. What score are we going to give to this story, Planet of the Dead? You can find out after the break. Yeah, this is where our friend Kev's going to steam in and let you know everything that's going on all those other fantastic podcasts across the Fandom Podcast Network. Stay tuned, stay on board, and stay on course. We'll be back here with more of our review of Planet of the Dead in a couple of minutes.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our Fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
We've teased and tantalized you there, and we can even clothe you too. Yes, there's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. If you head over to tpublic.com, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, that's where you'll find a store full of all the team colours for all of the shows, on everything from t-shirts to phone cases and tapestries. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself, treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain. So everybody wins. Yeah, I'm back here with Sarah and with Ian, and we're reviewing Planet of the Dead, a Doctor Who classic. Yes, I'm going to call this a classic, Sarah, a classic from 2009, Easter 2009, and I think it's high time that we gave it our review. So I'm going to ask you first, Ian, how many Easter eggs out of 5 would you give Planet of the Dead?
This is a hard one.
Isn't it?
I'm going to be generous. I'm going to, because of Lee Evans, I thought Lee Evans stole the show as far as I'm concerned. And Misha Ryan's quite sexy in this. So I'm going to give it a 3.
3 out of 5 from the Mega Geek. That's the mega vote. How about you, Sarah? How many Easter eggs out of 5 would you award Planet of the Dead?
I'm going to give it the full 5 because I can't think of a way that it could have been bettered other than, as Ian said, the Brigadier turning up. I think I think the script was good, the performances are fantastic, they're memorable. The fact that it's shot in Dubai and not constantly in Cardiff anyway. The absolute disaster that it was to film. I think that isn't that always the case though. There's things going wrong and it always comes out much better than you anticipate. That's what's wrong.
Happy accidents.
Film and TV now, they've got too much money and things go too smoothly. We need more bus accidents.
Yeah,
maybe.
And just fun adventure, and it just swept me away for the full hour. And you can't ask for more than that from your entertainment, really.
No. As I say, this has been a bit of a revelation to me. I didn't not enjoy it back in 2009, but the fact that I haven't gone back to it, I thought spoke volumes. But it turns out that I really, really enjoyed it. And I think if you'd have asked me a couple of weeks ago where I would have scored this, I'd have been with Ian. I'd have probably given it a 3 out of 5. This time, I can't quite bring myself to give it the full 5. I'm going to give it 4 Easter eggs out of 5.
Why is that then?
What does it need to do for the extra egg?
I think that it needs to feel. I think it needs to be slicker. Ooh. I think that the production values are probably a little too low. Generally speaking,
first negative thing I heard him say about a Doctor Who episode. Yeah, I'm taken aback.
And I'm thinking,
calendar, guys.
I'm thinking in relative terms. Yeah. I'm looking at what Doctor Who was like around that time. Not just what was to come in the special directly afterwards, but everything that was put out in the average season of Doctor Who. Was this befitting a special? And probably not. I think they could have done with a few. I think probably a few more quid. I think most of it is there on the page. I think we could have had a few more tritavores, a little bit more ambience, a little bit more mood. Yeah, I just think it's just not quite enough. And that's despite the best efforts of both David Tennant and Michelle Rhino. I think they're both fantastic. Lee Evans in particular, as you said, Ian, probably does steal this particular show. And another memorable turn from several of the cast members. Come to think of it, from the bus driver to the grumpy unit captain. I think everybody's brilliant in it. But yeah, I think it could just have been a bit more in relative terms. So yeah, I'm going to stick to the 4. I always say that, if I can't think of any way in which it could have been better, then I do tend to go for the 5. But in this respect, yeah, I think they could. It looks a little unloved, and
really, you think that?
yeah, and I can see why they went to Dubai. I can see why, but I think they could have probably have taken it somewhere else, and spent the money a bit more wisely elsewhere. I don't know. I don't want to get too analytical about it, but that's my sort of gut instinct. And I always say about these reviews.
Doesn't want to get too analytical, Ian.
What I always say about these reviews is that they are, we know that they're not the first word on these stories, and neither are they meant to be the last word. I probably will change my mind about it the next time I see it. That's one of the joys about Doctor Who.
Yeah, just to defend it slightly, and I don't know why. But it was very typical.
There's nothing to defend.
I know you're not. Yeah, I mean, no, I just think it was typical of a Doctor Who special, and I didn't expect any more or any less from it. Do you know what I mean? I knew it wasn't going to be up to the way the Americans present stuff in their sci-fi. I knew it wasn't going to be that, and I knew the music was going to be terrible based on the other episodes. But I found it enjoyable, and as I said, Lee Evans made me laugh. And Misha Ryan's pretty good on the eyes, and what more do you want from a Doctor? And David Tennant was gurning a lot and shouting a lot, and it was,
he was doing his thing. Well. Yeah, he was doing his thing, wasn't he? The bit with the sunglasses where he turned the normal glasses into sunglasses.
Exactly.
It's all ridiculous, but it all works brilliantly, and it worked for the majority of the British public too. So this episode, get this. This episode got an overnight rating of 8.41 million people.
Wow, so that's great. Yeah.
But
then again, it was a different time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. This is quite a long time ago now.
And this was on the 2 channels though, because this was on BBC One and BBC One HD.
Yes, it was.
True, but not that many people had that back then, come to think of it. 39.6% of the people who are watching the television at that time were watching this special. So that's the share, the audience share, 39.6%, very, very high. And the audience appreciation index figure, that was up at 88. So that's classified as excellent. So that's pretty good result for
really
that.
Good result.
As you said, this was the height of Doctor Who's popularity, the height of the David Tennant and Russell T Davies era, where toy stores were full of the brand. It was absolutely everywhere. We got the trading cards, we got the comics, all that. It was an absolute explosion. And of course, this was Easter, so there were Easter eggs too. Easter eggs aplenty there back in 2009. And the 10th Doctor was, his song was about to end. But at this point, things were, he was still the darling of the TV schedules. Planet of the Dead is available, obviously, on the iPlayer. I think it's up on the iPlayer at the moment, and you can stream it too. Which streaming service is this on now? I think is it on BritBox?
It's on Sky.
It's
on Sky.
Yeah, it's on Sky.
They're pretty much everywhere at the moment, or you can pick it up on physical media. You can get the Blu-ray and the DVD there of the individual releases, and you can get the complete specials, that box set that's got them all into. So this was the first story to come out on Blu-ray. You've got several choices, and you can still pick those up, either new or second-hand copies. They're all in circulation out there too. In fact, I watched my my DVD copy.
Did you?
Yeah.
I watched it on Sky. I watched
my DVD copy.
Did you? I watched it on Sky, and it does look great in HD. It looks fine on HD, so. And
it contains the best line in Doctor Who history.
What's that then?
That I'll just go into this police box and arrest myself.
Yeah.
It is a great line. Michelle Ryan is indeed playing Lady Christina for Big Finish. I think they put out a couple of different box sets with her encountering various Doctor Who creatures and characters there in a set of box sets. I've not heard any of these. I've always been a little bit cynical. About the amount of spin-offs that Big Finish produce, and this seemed like one too far for me. but I have to say that I enjoyed her so much in this. I would probably consider listening to these. I think there's several others I'd want to get first, but I don't think I'll take the piss quite as readily as I have been since they announced it. So she's been doing that since 2018. David Tennant announced his departure from the role of the Doctor on live TV, of course, very memorably.
I remember.
After accepting an award, Sarah, at the National Television Awards.
I remember gasping. That was the second most dramatic thing after Take That splitting.
Well, he was in the interval of giving a performance of Macbeth, wasn't he? I remember I was watching the NTAs at the time, and I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. He was able to do that, sort of sandwich one performance in between another. Yeah, it's expertly done, I suppose. Like David Tennant always seems to pull off everything expertly. In the 13 years since the final moments of the 10th Doctor's era, David Tennant he's never been off the screens, as he's really defied that idea that this is a part that ends careers and that casts people to type for decades afterwards. And he's
whatever happened to him.
Well, no, he hasn't. He's been able to go back to the part over and over and over again, Ian, on television, on audio, and for one-off charity things. He seems fearless in his association with it in a way that other actors, I think, not necessarily are.
I think those days are gone because remember there was this huge divide between movies and TV actors and movie actors, but now that line's blurred. So obviously at that moment in time, David probably thought that he'd get typecast and then that'd be the end of his career. But it's not like that today. I mean, look at Matt, look at what's her name, Billy Piper. They're all moved on. They're all doing their own thing and stuff like that. Look at what's her name, the gingerhead girl.
Karen Gillan.
Karen Gillan. She's she's big in Hollywood and stuff. So that's not the case anymore. The actors are stuck in one role anymore. So
no, he seems to. Not only is he, I think he's a great ambassador for the show, Sarah. It's probably
a good actor as well.
His best. I mean, I would say that Peter Capaldi is also an excellent ambassador for the show. But David Tennant seems so proud of his association with it. And some people say, well, how many times does this guy want to come back? Does he want to play all of the Doctors? And maybe he does. I don't know. Because and this is one of the things. People complain a little about David Tennant being as ubiquitous as he is, in the same way that Tom Baker was in the classic era. But when somebody's having this much fun and throwing himself into it as much as David Tennant does, I think that other shows, other 52 now. In fact, I think he's 50. I think he's 52 next week as of recording. So probably around now if you're watching this in the future. And so not only is he a great ambassador, but he's the fact that he has remained at the top of his game ever since. It's even when Doctor Who itself, when it's Doctor Who's fortunes may be quite low, Sarah, naming no names, Tennant's continued association with it, the fact that he won't distance himself from something which may be failing at times, means that he still believes in it. And so I think the audience will say, well, if that guy is still happy to be associated, he's happy to go back, he's happy to do this, then maybe it is worth sticking with, worth coming back for. I don't know.
I think him and Matt are the same, aren't they? They believe. I mean, Matt was asked the question, wasn't he, when he was making some film, and they said, "What's the best role he played?" He said, "100%, it's got to be the Doctor." So,
Morbius said, "Would you rather do more Morbius or more Doctor?" Well, there's no comparison, really, is there?
I'd say that the 10th Doctor is, from many people, certainly in Britain, this is the characterisation that is probably the most popular, certainly since Tom Baker, and possibly ever. After a couple of months' speculation last year, it was announced that David Tennant would be back again. We talked about it on this very show, in fact, but I don't think any of us, Sarah, could predict the exact circumstances of Tennant's latest return to the show. There was a big reveal that he was back, that he was going to be involved again. So that was in May. We got the confirmation that David Tennant would be returning to the show, but we didn't know the exact circumstances for several months. That would come in October of 2023, and that's an entirely fresh story that we'll be covering as the anniversary year continues here on Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, to be continued. But yes, Sarah, when you look back at the 10th Doctor's era, what are your overriding memories? Because obviously you came to it with his predecessor, but this was the boom. So what does this mean to you? What does this version of the character mean to you?
Yes, really good times in my life. Because at the time, I was a student going into work and having my first child. Joshua was born in 2008, and I used to put him to bed before 7:30, so I could watch the episode again. And family watching it with my nephews and my niece and the whole family. My nan, like you were saying before, everybody loved David Tennant. My nan, she wasn't really bothered about sci-fi or fantasy, but she liked David Tennant, and she'd sit and watch. She didn't have a clue half the time what was going off, but she just liked watching him run around and save the day. And yeah, all ages, kids at school acting out, being the Doctor. It was just really good time. Doctor Who was everywhere. It was in the shop. You went to Toys R Us and there were just aisles. And it
everywhere.
It was like a bygone era, unfortunately. But that is an awful thing.
Do you remember the David Tennant Estrogen Society of women who would follow him around the stage doors and things like that? There was a very devoted fan base for this man, which does seem to continue to this day. He's forever associated with this part, and he used to say in interviews, actually, Ian, that the moment that he got the part of the Doctor, that he realized that the first line of his obituary was now written. It was a certainty. Yeah. It was unmovable. Do you think that is true? You think so too?
Yeah, I mean, unless he does another part that actually, is big as the Doctor. Like for instance, Patrick Stewart. What do you put on his grave? Do you put Professor X, or do you put, Captain Picard? Do you know what I mean? So because he's big in both, isn't he? So I guess it would be Captain Picard, and his one will always be the Doctor, won't it? So no matter what he does, unless he does something that's so huge that you forget about the Doctor. But
maybe it'll be voicing that android in that upcoming Star Wars film. No. Yeah, I suppose the question is, which, not just will it be the Doctor, but which Doctor? Will it be the 10th? Or will it be the 14th? Who knows? That's all 10th, coming up before the end. Before the end of this year, and we'll be talking about it very excitedly as it counts down to the anniversary itself. So we've got several months to wait until it appears, until the shape of exactly what the BBC, Bad Wolf and Disney and Sony, exactly what they've got planned. At the moment, it's the 3 specials followed by the Christmas special, but there must be some things else out there. I can't wait to find out. We'll be covering it all here on both Type 40 and Type 40 Live. What a pleasure it's been to revisit this episode. Whose idea was it again?
It was mine.
It's that girl. That girl there. Thank you, Sarah. It was perfectly timed, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed this. But that's the old girl now, starting up a lot easier than this bus did, starting up and calling time on yet another edition of Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast. I'll be back, as always, with another one. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40 over at type40.podbean.com. Maybe we rolled up on the podcatcher of your choice on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeart Radio, TuneIn, Podbay, all those places. Heaven knows. We're also on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, here on the Spacebook channel. And of course, we're still on the fabulous Fandom podcast own master feed, loaded up with all those treats, not just on the weekly. They've got it coming to you on the daily. So yeah, please consider a trip sideways in time visit the FPN, you may well just find your next favorite podcast, as we always say. Now, maybe you'd like to get in touch with us, interact with us through our social media. That's where you can find us, Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who for all of that, or email us type40doctorwho@gmail.com. If you're feeling really brave, of course, and fancy some real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat, you can get just that. Just step into the Type 40 Facebook group, and that's where you can find all forms of life. Geeking out about classic Doctor Who, new Doctor Who, and anticipating what's to come, Sarah, in all new Doctor Who. Heaven knows where that's going to go in the specials and Series 14 going forward. Yes, so go and find the Type 40 Facebook group and hang out, have fun, and see. Yeah, if you that's the thing, isn't it? Make some big swings, make some predictions. What's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? Where can people catch up with you? Where can people catch up with you nowadays, Sarah, on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Starry-Eyed Who, and you can also find me on Facebook. Just look at I'm Sarah Louise Graham on there. Yeah, so use my other name.
Back in the real online world. And how about you, Ian? On Twitter?
I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram as the Mega Geek.
Don't sound too enthusiastic here.
No, I just sometimes I think social media is. I know it's a necessary evil today, but I just think sometimes it's a bit waste of my time. I'd rather be talking to people face to face than. But I understand if people haven't met me, whatever.
Go and knock him up.
Yeah.
Which calf or bookies are you going to be in?
I also have a channel called the Rebecca Gold channel, which has my
on YouTube.
On YouTube, which has my web series on there and a couple of films on there. So knock yourself out, go and visit that channel, give it a sub and give it a like, because it's important, I guess, and give this a like as well and a sub if you haven't. So there you go.
You can catch me on Instagram and Twitter as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and groaning, ranting and raving about
every
all
day.
Things geeky inside and outside of the TARDIS. I think it's been a rough week this week. I think I've done a little bit too much of the ranting and not enough raving. But swings and roundabouts, everybody. Yes, so come and find me on social media there. Come and come and see what's got my goat this week. I didn't even know I had a goat to get, but apparently I do. So and you can find us here, of course, on YouTube on the Spacebook channel. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, check you're still subscribed if you think you are, and hit the cloister bell to get all the notifications about what we're doing next and when we're doing it. More podcasts and live streams to Type 40 Live. Yay! That's coming back. Yeah, pause for the yay. So if you're doing the yays, Ian, then they probably are too. So we'll just leave them a bit long. Have they stopped yaying? I think they have. Yeah. So Type 40 Live, that's back soon to take us in to the summer months and whatever's to come with Doctor Who in the 60th anniversary year. I can't wait to see what's coming, and we're going to be ready, willing, and reasonably able to talk about it all over there on Type 40 Live. And that's it for this time. I think that's it for the 10th Doctor. Thank you, Sarah, for your company. It's great to have you back.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening to me.
Good stuff. And Ian, as always, for the mega perspective from the Megaverse.
I've missed Ian. I've missed you both.
We've had a mega time, haven't we? And that's it this time. Thank you to you for listening to all of this. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40. But that's it for this time. We'll speak to you all again soon. You take care. Bye-bye.